Yeah, a
Thank
pleasure. Lisa Owen with Checkpoint next. Back tomorrow.
Te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. E haere aki nei. Australia lets out a collective sigh of relief. Little Cleo is home. After 18 days missing in a massive police hunt, the 4-year-old Aussie girl abducted from a tent while her parents slept is found alive. Triple-digit daily community COVID cases could force the government to convert more isolation hotels to quarantine facilities. So what difference will new MIQ rules mean for capacity and early releases? We've signed up for millions more Pfizer doses, enough to immunise 5-year-olds and up if it's approved. An island divided. When should Aucklanders be allowed back on Waiheke? And COVID close to home sees Northlanders line up for tests and jabs.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. I'm Marama Tipole. Jacinda Ardern failed to show up to a scheduled event in Whanganui because more than 100 anti-vax protesters were making their presence felt. Jimmy Ellingham has more.
The Prime Minister was supposed to call into a mobile vaccination clinic in Whanganui to offer words of support to those getting their shots. But a vocal anti-vaccination protest forced her to change plans and instead talk to reporters at the nearby council chambers. Protesters discovered where she was and waited at the front door for her to leave. The Whanganui District Health Board had expected about 50 people to turn up to the mobile clinic today. The region's vaccination rate is lagging behind the national average.
The Prime Minister says the government's setting up a border control system that will allow vaccinated Aucklanders to leave the region for Christmas and summer. Jacinda Ardern says the border will stay in place but suggested those who are vaccinated and test negative can leave. She told ZM they're working out the logistics of having tens of thousands of cars needing to be checked at the boundary.
We're having to establish our own systems at the borders, and so how do we do that when you have up to 30,000 cars moving at a time?
Totally.
So that's what we're working on. So it's actually not about the overall vaccination status of the rest of the country. That's not what it's dependent on. It's our ability to set up a system that allows people to move safely.
Jacinda Ardern says this will apply at airports too, where it's easier to check vaccination status. The COVID-19 Response Minister is warning people not to be taken in by scammers offering vaccination exemptions in return for cash. The government is still setting up a centralised system to approve medical exemptions, and it will be on the Ministry of Health's website by early next week. Some people have already been issued with phony paperwork, and Chris Hipkins has this advice.
If someone's offering to sell you an exemption or suggesting that you could pay a fee for the service of getting an exemption, they are trying to rip you off. It is a rip-off scheme. Don't do it. There will be one exemption process and everybody will have to follow it.
In an incredible outcome, the 4-year-old girl who went missing from a remote campsite in Western Australia 18 days ago has been found alive and well. Police broke into a locked house in the coastal town of Carnarvon in the early hours of the morning and found Cleo Smith. A 36-year-old man is in custody. Western Australia Police Commissioner Chris Dawson says the search was dogged and extensive.
This is one of the most remarkable days in policing in Western Australia. I mean, I've been in policing for 45 years and I can say this is why police come to work every day. We'll leave no stone unturned and we never gave up hope. Look, of course we were very concerned, but we followed every particular lead that we had. It was methodical, it was dedicated.
Cleo has been reunited with her family. Vaccination rates appear to be stalling. On Monday and Tuesday, first dose numbers fell below 10,000 for the first time since July, when few people were eligible. An average of 7,400 first doses were given over the last 2 days. This week's second dose numbers are at their lowest weekday rate in 7 weeks. Former heavyweight boxer David Tua is used to throwing jabs and is encouraging young Pasifika to turn up and get one this week. The Samoan-born boxer is among the well-known Pasifika athletes backing a drive-through vaccination event at the Mangere East Hawks Rugby League club in Auckland this week. The Olympic bronze medalist says it's important for the community to turn out.
My health is compromised. That's why I'm here to support what Legend Lemalu and the team are doing to making sure that young people, our youth, and those who are not vaccinated can get not only their first jab, but their double jab.
Former Manu Samoa rugby captain Lemalu Semo-Sititi and former Silver Fern Linda Vangana also attended the event today, which is being run in conjunction with health provider Beta Drive Doctors. It's 4 minutes past 5. The All Blacks assistant coach John Plumtree says the sport knows it has an issue with concussion and brain injuries, but believes World Rugby is doing all it can to minimise the risks so the game can continue to be played. His comments come after 41-year-old former All Black prop Carl Heyman revealed he has early onset dementia and has joined a global lawsuit against World Rugby. Plumtree is saddened by Heyman's diagnosis, but is adamant things are changing in the game.
It has changed a lot. There's a greater awareness around it from the top level right down through to us as coaches, trying to minimise the accidents around the head. We know the game's under pressure to make sure that we do that. We've got a responsibility as coaches to make sure that parents want the kids to play.
The Scotland cricket captain Kyle Coetzee feels the Black Caps are under just as much pressure as they are heading into tonight's T20 World Cup match in Dubai. The Black Caps need the win to remain in contention for the semi-finals, while the Scots are chasing their first victory of the Super 12 stage. Coetzee says his side is far from intimidated.
They're going to come and try and push us as hard as they possibly can. They're a brilliant side. They unfortunately just missed out in the 50-over World Cup, and they'll certainly be pushing to try and make the later rounds of this competition. But pressure does some funny things sometimes, and we'll be looking to assert ourselves on them as much as we possibly can and try and put them under some pressure.
The match starts at 11 p.m. That's the news.
Winning the race. The darling of the turf.
I couldn't actually watch properly. I just couldn't focus. I just felt like I was going to pass out because here she comes, coming down the outside.
Losing the COVID battle in Northland.
It's easy to talk tough, but when you see one of your close friends get whacked, it tends to bring you back to reality.
And a possible runner-up.
I'm not down on the long-tailed bat. It's a worthy winner. In the world of bats, the short-tailed bat, it really is a very distinctive and unusual creature.
Your trifecta. Morning report, weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight. Thursday, strong to gale southeasterlies for the majority of the North Island, with heavy rain in the east, gradually easing tomorrow. For Northland to Waitomo, including Bay of Plenty and the central North Island high country, periods of rain easing to isolated showers this evening, becoming fine from Waikato southwards tomorrow. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, rain with heavy falls. Taranaki to Kapiti Coast, partly cloudy with isolated showers today. Wellington and Wairarapa, mostly cloudy with a few showers. Marlborough and Canterbury, mostly cloudy, becoming fine tomorrow afternoon. For Nelson to Fiordland, fine and sunny. Otago and Southland, remaining areas of cloud clearing this evening and becoming fine. And for the Chatham Islands, cloudy periods. It's 7 minutes past 5.
Thanks, Marama. Tēnā koutou katoa no mai haere mai ki Checkpoint I tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Finally, some good news, remarkably good news. Cleo is home. The little Australian girl abducted while on a camping trip with her family 18 days ago has been found alive, locked in a house just minutes away from her own family home. The 4-year-old was silently taken from a tent at a rural campsite in Western Australia in the dead of the night while her parents slept. It sparked a massive police hunt, and today they raided a house in Carnarvon, a town about 75 kilometres south of the campsite, and they found Cleo in one of the rooms. A man has been taken into custody and Cleo has been reunited with her family. Channel 9's Joshua Dorr reckons you could almost hear Australia breathe out.
It was incredible. We got the news around 4:30 a.m. our time here in Carnarvon, and rushed pretty much straight to the police station and into action. And as we arrived at the street where Cleo was found here, there were people still really emerging from their houses and waking up to this news themselves and finding a police scene in their street, but also hearing the news that Cleo has been found, and obviously very quickly, given the time difference, that had already spread across to the rest of the country here. And the response has been just incredible. And I mean, right across the country and the world, people have been following this case. Everyone's been hoping for a positive outcome, but admittedly, even ourselves here on the ground have been covering this story over the last couple of weeks. The longer the wait happened, the worse the fears grew that perhaps something might not come and that the worst might happen. So to get this result, and I mean, the most incredible thing, in my opinion, is that she's been found in the same town that she grew up in, the same town that she left for that camping trip with her family back on October 16, and it's just 7 minutes away from where her family lives here in Carnarvon. So it's really incredible that the police have been able to get the breakthrough and get this mystery clue that's led them to this house, and just incredible that she's been found alive and safe and healthy from all reports as well too. Which is, it's just a remarkable end to what has been, as you said, a story that's really gripped everyone, I think, in more ways than one.
Joshua, what do the neighbours think? I mean, this little girl was basically locked in a house right next door to them.
Yeah, we're amazed, really, and shocked and surprised. Speaking to them this morning, a couple were actually still awake at the time the raid happened, which was around 1 a.m. in the morning, and spoke about hearing detectives come in and shouting and bashing their way through into the house. And Cleo was the only one there at the time, and they saw her be brought out by detectives, and they knew instantly that it was her, and they were amazed and just couldn't really believe it. But, I guess there's a little bit of a sense of shock that something like this would happen in your street. This is a very normal suburban street here in Carnarvon. The community here knows the person, the man who's currently in custody and being interviewed by police. They say he's been there for quite some time, lived in the street for quite some time, keeps to himself, fairly lonely sort of person. There's no other people living in the house as well. So for them to be finding out that, as you said, that Cleo could have been here for almost 3 weeks inside is just insane. And police have certainly reacted that way too as well. They can't really believe it, and you get the sense, I think, from a lot of people that have been in the police force or covered these sorts of cases in the past. This is certainly an ending that isn't common in these types of cases. So it is remarkable, and just I guess a testament to everyone that continued to keep hope here. And it's a bit of a celebration having driven down the main street today. There's people hugging each other, people smiling and celebrating and taking down the missing posters, and they're celebrating just as much as everyone else is around the country, that's for sure.
Josh, I know it's really early days, but are there any clues to what led police to this particular house?
Not at this stage, Lisa. I mean, they've been doing everything in this investigation. They've left no stone unturned, from monitoring phone signals, and I think you'll find that the phone tower monitoring will have a bit of a play in this, but they pretty much described it this morning as the final jigsaw in a puzzle, and it was last night a little piece of information. We've heard reports that he was coming and going from the shops over the last couple of days, so whether there was something suspicious that tipped them off there, or whether it was some of the thousands of information that was coming in from public calls. They've been gathering all sorts of evidence over the last 3 weeks now, and something slotted in with everything else and drew them to this house, and they headed straight here, and that's where they found her. So remarkable, work from all the detectives and all the team up here to get a result that people thought might have been past them. So hopefully we'll continue to find out as developments happen. It's still in the morning here in Perth, so in Carnarvon in Western Australia. So we'll keep across the developments, but I'm sure we'll find out very soon what it was. And nonetheless, they've done great work. It's great reward for all the hours that detectives have put in.
And what are Cleo's parents saying?
Yeah, so yet to see them yet, and yet to, I guess, get a glimpse of them. But her mother, Ellie, released a post on social media saying how great it was to have her baby back in her arms. They've been cooperative the whole time with police. Unfortunately, as is the case in these missing persons cases, they've been the target of wild speculation online, and police have certainly rubbished that from the very outset. They were never treated as suspects, albeit investigated thoroughly, had their homes searched multiple times and have helped out in every sense of the way. So for them, this would be a massive sense of relief. They have a big family here in Carnarvon, uncles and aunties and nanas and pop and all that sort of thing. So the school community as well here where Cleo goes to school, it's been an awful time for them, but to have her back and safe and alongside her little sister as well, little 1-year-old sister, it's the news that I guess every parent could just appreciate. And I think, as you touched on before, there's a lot of tears around the country, certainly here from the police and everyone that's been working on this case. It's a happy tears and emotional tears, but it's the great result everyone was looking for.
What do we know about what Cleo might have said to the police and whether she has been and is going to be interviewed?
Yeah, so when police arrived here at this property, they burst in. We saw them removing crowbars and barricades that they were able to break their way into this locked room. And one officer, when he broke into the room, said and saw this little girl, said, "What's your name?" And she said, "My name is Cleo." And there is body camera supposedly of this incident. So whether or not we're able to get to see the result, which would be a fantastic visual. But at this stage, she has gone to hospital just for some treatment, but we're told that she hasn't suffered any major serious injuries, and the fact she wasn't rushed away in an ambulance or taken away in a serious condition is good news. So she is, from all reports, safe and well, and I'm sure, I guess, will form a part of the investigation that starts now, a new phase of the investigation, working out all the details behind her abduction.
And that's Channel 9's Joshua Dorr. It is 15 minutes past 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Kia ora rawatu mo te whakarongo mai e haere ake nei coming up, an island divided. Should Aucklanders be allowed to visit Waiheke if COVID restrictions are loosened next week? The government says anyone who's coughed up money for a medical vaccination exemption is being ripped off. A centralised process to approve medical exemptions for those who can't get vaccinated because of medical reasons, will begin next week. Anyone seeking a medical exemption right now has to go through the minister. However, Dr. Ashley Bloomfield says people are being issued phony paperwork.
Now, I understand that there are some people who have already been issued paperwork that is intended to be an exemption or an exception. If you have received such paperwork and work in corrections, education or health, you will still need to apply through a centralised process. If you have paid for that paperwork, you might want to ask for a refund.
The government has secured another 4.7 million Pfizer doses to be delivered in shipments throughout the next year. And that will include doses for children aged 5 to 11, but if the vaccine is approved for them, it won't be rolled out until next year. The COVID-19 Response Minister, Chris Hipkins, joins me now. Tēnā koe, Minister.
Tēnā koe, Lisa.
So no vaccines for kids until next year if it's approved. Does that mean primary school's not going back till then too?
You certainly couldn't draw that inference from it. Obviously, we want to be able to roll out the vaccine for children as soon as we can do that, as soon as it's been through the approval process, and as soon as we have access to doses for that purpose. Now, there's still some question about whether or not it's going to be necessary to have a specific paediatric dose or whether a dilution of the adult dose will be sufficient. So if it's the latter, then we've obviously got enough doses in the country now in order to be able to get underway with that program. So there's still some uncertainty there, but it has to go through the full approval process first. That's the key thing that we've got to work our way through.
Approval process aside, are you saying that you would be comfortable sending primary school kids back, even if they don't have an option of a vaccine at the time you send them back to school?
Look, we have not made that decision yet. We've foreshadowed that we are considering potential reopening of primary schools on a limited basis from the 15th. But we've not made a final decision on that at this point. I met with the Auckland primary principals leaders earlier today to get their feedback on how they're feeling about that. But we'd better say they shared a mixed range of views about both the feasibility of having limited numbers back, but also, as with many in the community, they were reflecting what they're hearing from their parents.
So, Minister, how long before you have to make a call either way? If the start date's the 15th of November, penciled in, when is the last opportunity to call it either way? How long are you going to make them wait for a decision?
We'll discuss it again at Cabinet on Monday, and then I think we'll provide some clearer guidance at that point.
So you'll make an announcement Monday afternoon after the Cabinet meeting?
Certainly, early next week, Monday or Tuesday next week, yeah.
OK, the Prime Minister has confirmed today that the Auckland border will still be there at Christmas. So, bearing that in mind, who is going to be able to leave? What is the criteria going to be? Will you have to be double vaccinated and have a clear COVID test, or will it be an either or of those things?
I think both of those things are likely to be in the mix. We've still got a wee way to travel before we get to that in terms of just our overall COVID response. There's still a bit of unknown around how many cases we might be dealing with outside of Auckland and all of those sorts of things. But in terms of people being able to travel over Christmas, certainly being fully vaccinated is going to open up a lot more freedom and a lot more opportunities. And there's likely to be some testing requirements around that as well.
OK, so how's that going to be managed from a practical point of view at checkpoints where you're going to have potentially tens of thousands of people wanting to leave the city in the same time?
Well, one of the things that we've been working on around the vaccine certificate that we've been putting in place is not just a piece of paper, but something that can be verified very quickly. So the vaccine certificate that we'll be producing will sit on someone's phone or even a paper copy, but there will be an instant verification process. So it can be effectively be scanned by a verifier and they can get an instant result to ensure that it's a genuine
Understand that, Minister.
Certificate.
Yeah, I do understand that. But potentially you're going to have a queue of cars, thousands of cars long, and if you're scanning multiple people in a car at a time, that's not a pretty practical solution. So is that how you envisage this working?
Well, look, we're working through our options on that at the moment and ways to potentially spread, for example, the travel. So maybe that people get allocated a time in which they can travel. But yes, I think...
So it's going to be like getting an MIQ voucher to leave the city?
No, I mean, because we have expand capacity faster in terms of the land border. But my message is, for those who are wanting to travel out of Auckland, they will expect that it will be quite a time. They should expect that it'll be a reasonably time-consuming process if they're travelling via land. In terms of travelling via air, they will expect queues at the airport, but I guess at the airport we have systems in place already to check people's tickets, check other things at the airport.
So by land, do you anticipate that people will be given an allocated time slot to leave the city in order to manage traffic flow?
We haven't made that decision yet.
Is that what you're considering, though, Minister?
It's an option. So we're just working through what the practical options are to ensure that we don't end up with people, spending days sitting in their cars and have all of Auckland grind to a halt. So
how will you get that slot then? Will it be a lottery system for the slot?
Look, like I said, we have not worked our way through any of that yet. What I'm foreshadowing is that we are considering whether we haven't made decisions on it, whether there are practical ways of helping to manage that.
When do you reckon you will be able to give people some surety of the system? Can you give us a date that you will reveal the conditions and the means by which you can leave Auckland? Because Christmas isn't that far away and summer holidays, etc.
No, I can't give that clarity at this point, but we're certainly working to try and provide people with that clarity as soon as we can.
OK, so vaccination certificates, they're being trialled right now, you've said today. Who's trialling them? Who's involved in the trial?
So at the moment, I think there's a few messages that got mixed up in there. So there's stress testing, making sure all the technical capabilities there, everything's ready to go. In terms of the people who are invited to trial, there will be a mixture of people. There'll be people who have signed up for My COVID Record already, and then a mix of people who haven't yet signed up for My COVID Record. We've got quite a few people who have already started that process, so they've gone to My COVID Record. They can now see their vaccination status and the details of when they were vaccinated and so on. A mixture of those people will be invited.
So will they be randomly selected, Minister? And how big will the group be?
It will be a trial. I don't have the number of how many people are going to be involved, but we want to make sure that the system is robust and that it's going to work.
What if the vaccination certificate isn't ready when Auckland is ready to move, literally?
Oh, look, I'm quite confident that the system will be ready. The people that have developed this have delivered on time, slightly ahead of schedule, all of the major technology that we've required for our COVID effort. So Book My Vaccine was developed by them, and despite all the doomsday predictions that wasn't going to work, it's been hugely successful, as has the inventory management system that they put in place, as has the COVID immunisation register. So I do have absolute confidence in the team who have been doing this work.
Appreciate your time as always. Thank you for joining us. That's the COVID-19 Response Minister, Chris Hipkins there. Homai o whakaaro, we'd love your feedback on that. Nō reira anei na kaupapa mō te hōtaka nei. How do you reckon a system, some kind of booking system to leave Auckland would work? Should it be double jabbed and with a clear COVID test? And would you be happy to book a time slot in order to leave the city? Pātui mai, text me 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or you can email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Anti-vaxxers have disrupted the Prime Minister's media events for the second day in a row. Jacinda Ardern failed to show up to a scheduled event at a vaccination clinic in Whanganui because more than 100 anti-vax protesters were making their presence felt. Our reporter Jimmy Ellingham and visual journalist Sam Rillstone have more.
All going to plan, the Prime Minister would have dropped by to offer words of encouragement to a steady stream of people getting their vaccinations and tucking into the food on offer. But that stream at a mobile vaccination clinic at a Whanganui petrol station dried to a trickle. Instead, protesters ruled the roost, singing, yelling and practising their heckles for when Ms Ardern showed. She never did, giving the event a miss and speaking to reporters at the nearby Whanganui District Council chambers. She says she doesn't take the protest personally.
We are at a stage in the vaccine rollout where we are trying to reach into communities that may hold firm views. But we need to have those conversations. And just talking to some of our health practitioners, their goal is to talk to everyone, wherever they can, to try and have those conversations around why it is so important that people are vaccinated.
It's the second day in a row Ms Ardern has been interrupted after she moved the press conference in Northland on Monday because of anti-vaccination heckling. Inside the council chambers, it was business as usual for Ms Ardern.
We've been very clear. We will not require and will never require vaccine certificates to access food, to access government benefits, to access services that people need to live.
But the protesters tracked her down and waited for her to leave at the front. Instead, she used a side entrance. At the mobile vaccination clinic, Mary-Anne Lamont and Sandra van der Lubbe were disappointed they didn't get to shout encouragement to the Prime Minister.
Yes, we come here to show Jacinda our support. She's doing a fantastic job. Yeah, I think she's doing a really great job, actually, in a difficult situation. Yeah.
What do you think about the protesters over there?
I think they're very noisy and I don't think they've thought through the issues very well. Yeah.
The Whanganui District Health Board had expected about 50 people to get the vaccine at the clinic today. Among those who did show was Tamati Waiheke.
Through work, I don't know who I come against, so I thought I'd go and get my jab for them.
Is it your first or second?
That's my second jab.
You weren't put off by the protesters?
No, well, that's why I come, so I can get a $10 ticket.
Cool. And you think it's important for people to get vaccinated?
Well, it's up to you. It's your own choice, but for me, it's for my kids.
Elena Tiki Clark didn't miss out either.
Really just to give me a better chance when COVID hits our town. And I want freedom. I want the country to open up. I want the economic things to all come back again. And I don't hear any other solution.
John Mahi had good reasons for showing up too.
I got injected because I was scared. You know, when they told us it was going to be on the same level as the flu pandemic.
Vaccination rates in Whanganui are behind the national average. 81% of people have had their first dose and 69% their second. The DHB says it will go door to door and do what's necessary to get to 90%. Ardern says she has faith Whanganui will get there.
It is 26 minutes after 5. Kia amo tonu mai. Stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Winery tours and B&B batch bookings remain off the cards on Waiheke Island, despite the Auckland region's impending move to Step 2 of Level 3. The rules are creating a divide amongst Waiheke locals. Some say they're desperate for Aucklanders to womble off the ferry, while others are more cautious. Our two Nicks, Nick Trubridge and cameraman Nick Monroe, have both sides of the island debate.
Waiheke Island, its vineyards sucked dry of weddings and weekenders, its beaches bereft of swimmers and sunbathers. The passenger ferry terminal, a ghost land, barely a mainlander in sight, but Harold Singh's still here.
The mood is very sombre.
It's very sombre. I mean, there's, like I talk to my friends, they just want, we've probably had enough, we want to get out. Everyone's been vaccinated, everybody in my operation have been vaccinated, and we're just thinking, how come, we can't get out? And it's been long and hard.
Shed 36 is his place. Chances are, if you've arrived on the island by boat, you've smashed one of his pies or sipped one of his coffees. He's been here over a decade and says nothing comes near this.
I was just talking to the accountant and he's comparing 6 weeks to 6 weeks, and we're about 20% of what we usually are. And that was quite, don't get me wrong, we're getting assistance from the government, which is essential because, we took a big whack in this shutdown. The first one was a bit of a novelty, right? We went through it and luckily we had really good weather and everything. It was quite good. The second one was like as we're starting to just come up, just head above water, and suddenly a big whack.
And the whack is starting to burn. A trickle of loyal locals are the only ones lining up. The morning rush, a far cry from what it once was. And as we drive up the hill from Matiatia Bay to Oniroa, the roads are quiet too. Buses with passengers you can count on one hand. A sprinkling of locals, the odd tradie. Oniroa's streets may be relatively quiet, but around Waiheke's dinner tables, outside its cafes, debate is starting to rage. And some say this is a community divided over Delta. Kath Handley's a name known to pretty much everyone on the island. She chairs Waiheke's local board.
I think it's becoming increasingly divided between those who are desperate for the economy to be kick-started and to get that visitor economy going, and also to have the holiday homeowners, so 35% of our houses are owned by people who don't live here. So there is definitely, and that group are definitely more stressed and more vocal.
Then there's the other side of this COVID conundrum.
There are people here who are very keen never to open the border again, but there are those who are just taking a very common sense view to what is required here to keep the population as safe as possible until we get that vaccination rate high enough. It's quite divided.
So we went to talk to locals on both sides of the ledger. Some of you will remember Chris Hoff-Nielsen, who recounted his tale of woe outside one of his bike shops in Auckland's Newmarket. You think that was bad? Well, try running a bike hire business on Waiheke right now.
This is our season where we make our winters livable. And so to lose these days, it's just really every day now counts for us.
He says enough is enough. Let the people on the ferries, let them bike and buy bottles of Waiheke's finest.
We're quite vaccinated, so the risk for the island I see is quite small, and being out on the water or being on the beach or even sitting sipping a glass of wine on a deck somewhere, the risk to that I see is minimum. And I see on the Fuller's ferries, we could easily make a way in which we sit on the top decks, or we would have more ferries. Fuller's, I don't think, would be against that in as much as they are sitting idle too.
It's too wet to bike today, so we drive down to Palm Beach, where we run into Corey Road resident Jacqueline Taylor, a local poet and marriage celebrant who's immunocompromised.
If it was to happen as we're seeing now, up north or down in Waikato or wherever, or even Christchurch, where 2 or 3 older people, are asymptomatic until they're not, and then suddenly have a medical event, okay? Are the business people really prepared to go, oh, well, not even elderly, maybe even middle-aged or younger, are they really prepared to say, okay, well, we can put up with that?
But there's one view all of these people do share. Delta will reach Waiheke. Everyone here acknowledges it's a matter of when, not if. Some walking the streets say open sesame.
I do think it's ready to open up more. Yep, I think businesses have done all they can. They've sort of suffered a lot and they should open up. I mean, we're as close as possible to getting our vaccination rates. It is time, not just to let the schools open, but to let the businesses open.
Others a little more wary.
In the island, we're a little bit behind 90%, so I'd like to see that a bit higher.
I think
we should just hunker down a bit more because it's not gone away, is it?
Another thing we're assured isn't going anywhere, checks on travellers from the mainland. Car ferry operator Sealink telling us it does ask people why they're travelling. Despite that, we weren't asked for any proof of essential worker status. Sealink telling Checkpoint it doesn't want to put workers at risk of ridicule and abuse. As for enforcement action against Aucklanders escaping the big city, the company says that's a matter for the police.
And if you were listening to that story from the two Nicks on radio, we'll put the video on our Facebook page so you can check it out. Kia ora e te iwi e haere nei e a Checkpoint. The home isolation trial for business is underway. We'll catch up with a recent arrival home to see how it's all working. Is New Zealand Rugby doing enough to prevent head injuries after a former All Black is diagnosed with early onset dementia? And the other jab that you can get in Auckland during lockdown, Botox. Yep. Botox. Homai o whakaaro, we would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the program this evening, but particularly on potential plans for how Aucklanders will travel in and out of the city and over the border during the summer break. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or you can flick us an email, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It's time now to get to the headlines. Ko marama anō tēnei.
Thank you, Lisa. The COVID-19 response minister says it's still up in the air whether primary school children will be able to return to class this year. The vaccine manufacturer Pfizer has received approval in the US to give the shot to children aged 5 to 11, but the New Zealand regulator is still to make a decision. The Minister, Chris Hipkins, who is also the Education Minister, has told Checkpoint discussions are ongoing about how children will receive a vaccination and also of when schools can reopen. He expects both to be discussed by Cabinet next week. Mr Hipkins announced earlier the government had ordered another 4.7 million Pfizer doses to be delivered over the next year. The discovery of a missing 4-year-old girl 3 weeks after she disappeared in Western Australia is being described as remarkable. Police broke into a locked house in the coastal town of Carnarvon in the early hours of the morning and found Cleo Smith. A 36-year-old man is in custody. Channel 9's Joshua Dorr told the program the community was shedding tears of relief. The preschooler was found safely. The Finance Minister says New Zealand's low unemployment rate shows the resilience of the New Zealand economy. The official unemployment rate has fallen to 3.4% in the 3 months ended September from 4% in the previous quarter. The underutilisation rate, which is a measure of the slack in the labour market, also fell to 9.2%, the lowest since mid-2007. Vaccinated Aucklanders are likely to be allowed to leave the region for Christmas and summer. The Prime Minister says the government are setting up a border control system for the holidays. Jacinda Ardern says the border will stay in place. A record $11.7 million was gambled by New Zealanders at the TAB on the Melbourne Cup yesterday. Very Elegant's 4-length win at Flemington gave New Zealand jockey James McDonald and expat New Zealand trainer Chris Wooler their first Melbourne Cup win. Those are the headlines. Our next news and sport update is at 6.
Kia ora rā, e ho no mai hoki mai. This is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Ko taku hoa e nai nei, ko Nona Peltier, who's standing by to talk business. Nona, the third quarter labour market data has taken the market by surprise. Why?
Well, it's the numbers. The unemployment rate dropped to 3.4%. Now, that is the lowest it's been I guess for 14 years. It equals what we received a low there 14 years ago, so a long time ago. And look, there were an additional 54,000 jobs added in the 3 months ended September. And wage inflation, and so that's really, I guess, wage growth, it was 2.5%. That's also the highest in a decade. And it was all sorts of jobs that contributed to that. It was construction, professional services. You know, just a lot of jobs are being created by the economy. And with a very tight labor market, you can expect that wage growth to continue to put pressure on, I guess, the inflation.
And Nona, the Reserve Bank warns that the housing market is at unsustainable levels. Well, not really any surprises there. So what's it planning to do about that?
Well, it says that it's done analytical research, and have determined that they know for certain that the prices are at unstable levels. Their concern isn't so much with the financial stability of the banking system or the economy, but for individuals. Those are really first home buyers or new home buyers, people who have recently come into the market and are going to find it difficult with interest rates rising and so forth. They're asking the banks to be careful, to take a very conservative approach to risk where house mortgaging is concerned. They're also working on a debt-to-income restriction. They're going to do some consultation with the banks and then hopefully bring in something like that. But the governor of the Reserve Bank, Adrian Orr, says that supply is changing. The tide is turning. There's going to be more supply, and he sees a future of more sustainable housing prices that are more realistic and match wage growth.
Nona, let's take a spin around today's numbers.
Yeah, well, they were a bit of a surprise. They were quite weak, but just ended up in positive territory. The NZX Top 50 closed 1 point up to 12,994. The New Zealand dollar is trading at 71.2 US cents, 95.7 Australian and 50.2 pence.
Ngā mihi, Nona. Ka kite. That's Nona Peltier with Business News there. Far north communities are nervously waiting to see if COVID has been spreading unchecked through their towns. The top of the Motu is in level 3 lockdown as health officials work to trace any links with other community cases. But so far, there aren't any. A boost in testing hasn't turned up any answers yet, but it's early days. Camera operator Angus Drever and reporter Nita Blake-Person filed this report from the far north.
Doubtless Bay's golden beaches under a gloomy sky today. 2 mystery cases in nearby Kaingaroa still have no known links to any other positives in the region, and locals in Cooper's Beach are locked down.
Oh, so we're inundated. We just came up from Kaio because we knew that the area had some sort of place of interest. So we thought we'll start because it borders onto our area, and so it's been all go.
Te Runanga o Whaingaroa Clinical Manager Lorna Smith and her team were flat tack at this mobile clinic today. They ran out of tests after midday and were running low on vaccines too.
We've had a few first doses. We've had a family of 6 was our first. They saw us going past because we forgot our signage, and at least they saw us in our gear, so they turned around and came back.
It's the low vaccine rates in the north that have prompted this lockdown, a border in place just beyond Kaio limiting the far north to level 3. Locations of interest linked to the mystery cases, like the Awanui Hotel, were closed today as contact tracers work to find any missing pieces to the puzzle. Other businesses, like Barry Keeper's Whānau Meats Shop in Kaitaia, are open but quiet.
To be quite honest, yesterday was a bit of a shock, but we just have to deal with it. Everyone's in the same boat. And I think that my customers especially are pretty aware of what needs to be done, signing in, doing the tracing, trying to keep the distances and that sort of stuff.
He's nervous about COVID being in the north, but is keeping positive.
We're all worried that, I don't want this. We've had the shop closed twice through level 4, and it's quite stressful, but no good stressing out about it really, because we're not the only one in the same boat. We just have to make sure that we keep ourselves safe, keep the staff safe and our customers safe.
It's yet another wake-up call for Northlanders of the realities of COVID. Today, the region just passed the 80% first dose mark. Michelle Smith was getting her second jab today, but she says a lot of wary people in the community.
I'm seeing bizarre conspiracy theories and an awful lot of just mistrust and anxiety and anger. The division between people sucks, and people should get that sorted, and we need to be one, not this kind of rubbish that's going on.
Mindy McDonald was also getting her second jab. She's seeing a lot of misinformation online.
There's an awful lot of things out there on social media that are I don't think, correct, and I think that's what's steering people in the wrong direction. The facts are the proof, really, aren't they? So, I mean, I did my research and I'm happy with the decision that I made, and yeah, doing it for our family, and we own a local business, so we just really want to get on with life.
Ali Reid says it's access to the vaccine as well as the false claims which are making things tough.
You're in an economically deprived area here. They don't always have reliable transport, or it mightn't be registered or warranted or whatever. Take the vaccine to the people in your little camper vans and whatever, take it to them, so there's no reason for them not to travel. Go to their marae, their rugby clubs. Do it there on a smaller community whānau scale or hapu scale.
The region will remain in lockdown until next Tuesday at this stage, with Cabinet scheduled to review the situation on Monday. Until then, it's a nervous wait to see how far COVID's spread in our northernmost communities.
As eagle eyes watch Auckland's vaccination rate tick up towards 90%, jabs of another kind are also on offer in the locked-down city. Botox, Botox, the frown-freezing, wrinkle-busting cosmetic injections are available under Level 3. That's despite other close-contact businesses like hairdressers and even retailers being unable to operate face-to-face. So what's the deal? Dr Sarah Hart is from the New Zealand Society of Cosmetic Medicine and says they fit the bill to be operating.
Very much like other healthcare services have returned, like physios and chiropractors, we were inspired to approach the Ministry of Health about it. So what we did is we developed some very protective guidelines that go over and above what the Ministry of Health requires, and we then got those approved by the GP College, and then we took those to the Ministry of Health, who approved them last week for us.
A couple of things there, Doctor. You say like other healthcare services. Do you consider Botox to be a healthcare service?
I think Botox is a nice to have. So it's a prescription medicine, and it needs to be administered by a qualified professional like a medical practitioner or registered nurse, and we have to abide by all of those guidelines. However, it's not an essential service when it's given cosmetically. It's nice, it can make you feel great, but it's certainly a permitted activity, not an essential one.
Yeah, because the ministry says it doesn't specifically grant exemptions for these services, but where Botox is being provided as a health service, then it would be likely to be able to administer it under Alert Level 3. But if, as you say, it's mainly for cosmetic reasons, then it's not a health service. So how should it be operating at Level 3?
That's because we have applied for and got specific approval from the Ministry of Health to do so. So that's the conditions under which we are operating. Very high levels of protection. So both the practitioner, the medical practitioner, and the patient need to be double vaccinated. The medical practitioner needs to wear a fitted N95 mask. The patient must wear a mask throughout, and it's only under 15 minutes contact time.
So, in essence, you're saying the ministry has given you a special exemption, has it?
Yes, the Ministry of Health has approved, and WorkSafe has seen that approval and confirmed that it is appropriate for us to be open.
Yeah, because the ministry says it doesn't specifically grant exemptions for these services. It doesn't grant exemptions.
Well, we've followed all of the advised routes to do so, and WorkSafe has confirmed, and we're not aware of any other restrictions that we would have to go through.
When did you get the sign-off, do you believe?
Tuesday last week.
And what percentage do you think of clients are using this as a health service rather than a cosmetic service?
So I think that NZSCM, New Zealand Society of Cosmetic Medicine, our services are cosmetic. So our practitioners are giving Botox for cosmetic purposes. Some of our practitioners treat patients for medical reasons, but that's a very small minority. The vast majority of what we do is cosmetic work.
So you would accept that these clinics are not operating as health services?
I think that it's certainly not an essential health service, no.
And not a health service at all if most of them are having cosmetic work?
Well, cosmetic surgery is happening in the private hospitals and has been since before Step 1, Level 3. So cosmetic services and operations for cosmetic purposes are going ahead. Now, those are a much higher risk of transmission than a contact time with the patient's mask on of under 15 minutes. So certainly botulinum toxin is a prescription medicine that can only be prescribed by a medical practitioner. So healthcare services for cosmetic purposes are going ahead in other areas, and we have obtained specific approval from the Ministry of Health for our guidelines around this.
Hey, can you understand how some people listening to this will think, oh, this is a bit strange, that you can go and get a cosmetic Botox treatment because it makes you feel better about yourself, but you can't go and buy a pair of jeans in a shop and that might make you feel better about yourself, and you can't go and get your hair cut either, which is a close contact retail experience, if you like. So do you think that there's a disconnect here?
I think the difference is that we're qualified medical practitioners with access to medical grade PPE and training in infection control. And because of the professional standards that we are held to, it means that we are able to access the research, that we're able to evaluate the research, we're able to write these guidelines that were put through a subcommittee of an anaesthetist, an ophthalmologist, an emergency medicine doctor and primary care. That gives our members a much higher ability to ensure that the risk of transmission is minimised compared to retail with trying on a pair of jeans or going to the hairdresser.
What's the demand like?
I haven't even announced on social media that I'm open because I have a lot of patients who missed out during lockdown and I'm just working through those. You imagine if I've got, 10 to 12 weeks worth of cancelled appointments to work my way through. That keeps me pretty busy. And also, we have found that Zoom has made people a bit more aware of their appearance, and that has brought some new inquiries to many of us as well. So demand is very high currently.
And that's Dr. Sarah Hart from the New Zealand Society of Cosmetic Medicine. Now, in a statement, the Ministry of Health has told Checkpoint it doesn't grant exemptions for these services, but Botox can be provided as a health service by registered practitioners under Alert Level 3. However, Checkpoint has seen an email from a Ministry of Health official to Dr. Sarah Hart stating that they approve the guidelines for recommencing non-essential cosmetic surgical care. We've also seen correspondence from WorkSafe accepting the email from the Ministry of Health as evidence a Botox practice can operate. It is 10 minutes to 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. The self-isolation trial is underway for some of the 150 people chosen to be guinea pigs for the pilot. They've had to meet strict criteria, including isolating at a private residence on their own within 50 kilometres of Auckland or Christchurch airports. It's only open to business people arriving back in the country by December the 8th. Sasha Coburn got back from the US yesterday and started self-isolating as part of the pilot, and she joins me now. Hi, Sasha. When you landed, what was different?
Well, the very first thing that was awkward when I landed was that they called my name out over the plane PA. I wasn't ready to disembark, and the announcement came out and said, Sasha Coburn, you need to get off the plane first. So I thought, right, I better pack my bags quickly then. So that meant I was first off the plane and escorted to a separate medical area, and in that area I had a rapid antigen test and a PCR test. Now, those tests normally take place in the managed isolation hotels, but because I'm not going to a hotel, I had those at the airport. So that was different to the standard MIQ procedure.
Right, so once you got the rapid one cleared, off you went, right? So how did you get from the airport to your accommodation?
So I had a shuttle that was provided by the authorities, and an information pack was given to me there. I was on my own on the shuttle. The driver obviously was up the front driving. There was a complete panel that separated me from the driver, and just me dropped off, and I had the welcome pack, and there's a bunch of information, things that I have to do, signs on each of the doors of the property that say, stop, don't come in, I'm self-isolating, nobody can come in the property, and the only part of the property that I can leave is into a private garden out the back where I can exercise. I'm not allowed back out into the front of the facility.
Okay, so the trial was for people who live or can stay in a house 50 k's from Christchurch or Auckland. So you don't normally live in one of those cities. What have you had to do for accommodation?
Well, so it's my wonderful parents who have moved out of their house. So they've made their home available to me. They live just near the airport in Auckland, and they have gone to live with my aunt and uncle, keep them company for a few weeks, and that's enabled me to be in the self-isolation pilot. My motivation was to free up an MIQ spot for somebody else, and also it's obviously I'm motivated to get more people able to come home and for business people to flow more freely in and out of New Zealand, but I absolutely want that to be done in a way that's proven to be safe and that keeps our most vulnerable communities safe.
Sasha, did anyone come and check the property ahead of you being ticked off as part of the pilot?
No, they didn't. And interestingly enough, there's a flat downstairs at the property, and I had initially thought maybe I could just stay in the downstairs flat, mum and dad upstairs. That's ruled out. You sign a declaration that says nobody else will be in the physical building, and if it's proven that you have falsely declared the property, that's when you're up for the penalties. And the penalties are pretty severe, so we didn't even contemplate doing anything other than the absolute letter of what was required.
So, how are they tracking you? Is it all trust? Have you had any phone calls? Are they watching your phone? Is there some kind of app or GPS thing that you have to download? What's the deal?
I feel so sorry for the people who are tracking me. What happens is I had to send them a photo. They ring me 3 times a day. On each of those calls, they send a link to my phone. I click OK and they can see me. I feel sorry for them because every time they ring, I'm in bed recovering from the jet lag. So I'm a wreck, an absolute wreck. But they can match my face. That's the first thing. Then they download a link and that confirms the GPS location of where I am. Then the third thing I have to do is I have to physically go and show them the front door of the property that has the self-isolating poster on the front of it. So I'm on my second day now and we've done that 5 times. So it's 3 times every day that they call in and we do those 3 things each time.
So, just give us a quick idea of why you need to travel.
So I had won a Prime Minister's Business Scholarship pre-COVID to study at Harvard University, and at Harvard Business School I was required to go for 3 weeks, 3 years in a row, and I'd missed a year because of COVID, and the government had already invested in that training for me. So when the training was put back on in 2021, I said I'm going to do all I can to go, otherwise the investment's wasted.
Sasha, you've touched on this a little bit. What do you really want? The top thing you want to come out of this pilot that you're involved in?
I would love to be able to show that this is a safe and effective way for people to self-isolate, and I understand that there is some apprehension in the community that people can't be trusted, and I would love to be able to show that there is a bunch of people that are really keen to see this work so we can more easily conduct our trade and do our business.
Great to talk to you, Sasha. All the best. That's Sasha Coburn, who's part of that self-isolation trial, which was open to businesses, 150 people chosen. She's one of the guinea pigs. Environmental groups say it's pointless and cynical for the government to sign up to a global pact to drastically slash methane emissions when it has no plans to match the goal itself. More than 100 countries have agreed to cut global methane emissions by a third by 2030. RNZ's climate reporter Hamish Cardwell is covering the COP26 UN Climate Summit, and he filed this report.
Methane is one of the most potent greenhouse gases, responsible for a third of human warming. So the move led by the EU and US at COP26 to dramatically slash emissions is being labelled a game changer by US President Joe Biden.
One of the most important things we can do in this decisive decade is to keep 1.5 degrees in reach, is reduce our methane emissions as quickly as possible.
But farmers in New Zealand will be breathing a sigh of relief, because while the government has joined the pledge, it has no plans to match the 30% global reduction target. It is sticking to the current goal to reduce domestic agricultural methane emissions, about half our total greenhouse gas output, by 10% by the end of the decade. Christine Rose from Greenpeace says that renders the pledge meaningless.
Everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die. And this is a similar case where we all want to sign on to these global feel-good agreements and make the pledge, but actually even taking the easy steps in addressing industrial dairy's contribution to climate change is a step too far for this country and this government.
She says it undermines the efforts other countries will have to make on our behalf. Forest and Birds' Kevin Haig labelled the government two-faced, calling it a pointless gesture.
This is a naked example of the government failing to follow through on climate change. It's making a gesture only, and that's completely inadequate.
But as Agricultural Greenhouse Gas Research Centre Director Dr Harry Clark points out, New Zealand couldn't match the pledge without requiring farmers to drastically reduce herd sizes.
I think given the profile of our methane emissions, where our emissions are dominated by emissions from ruminant animals, it would be very difficult for us to meet that without major disruption to the agricultural sector.
Massey University Climate Emeritus Professor Ralph Sims says the government is caught between a rock and a hard place.
If we didn't sign up, we'd be looked on as a pariah and politically criticised.
What if I had said, actually, I'll tell you what, we already have a work program to deal with methane, so we're not going to sign this pledge?
That's Climate Change Minister James Shaw, who says the government is working on plans, due in 2025, that would make New Zealand one of the first countries to put a price on agricultural emissions.
We've been saying for some time that actually countries do need to focus on methane in a way that we have actually started working on it. There's over 100 countries in the world now who are going to sign up to actually doing something about the methane problem that they have.
World leaders are now leaving the COP26 meeting, leaving their negotiators to hammer out the details to try and keep warming below catastrophic levels.
Some of your feedback before the news at 6 on the Auckland border and what's going to happen at Christmas. Well, a test apparently, and you need to show you're vaccinated. This person says, how can they COVID test large numbers of exiting Aucklanders just before Christmas? Another listener says, I've had a wee preview of the options for leaving Auckland by land. OMG, it's going to be like one of those apocalyptic movies where everyone tries to leave the city but can't. God help us, they say.
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Kia ora, I'm Marama Tipole. Fully vaccinated Aucklanders could be allocated a time slot to cross the boundary and leave the region at Christmas. The Prime Minister has today suggested vaccinated and negative tested people will be able to leave Auckland for the holidays. COVID-19 Response Minister Chris Hipkins told Checkpoint work is underway to prevent thousands of people leaving the region at the same time. He says this could be done by allocating people a time window to leave the city. Mr Hipkins says vaccine certificates will also be used.
They should expect that it'll be a reasonably time-consuming process if they're travelling via land. In terms of travelling via air, they will expect queues at the airport, but I guess at the airport we have systems in place already to check people's tickets, check other things at the airport.
Chris Hipkins wouldn't say when a final decision will be made. The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, says she'll continue to visit communities to get the vaccination message out. Protests today forced Ms Ardern to cancel and reorganise staged media events at vaccination clinics in the lower North Island. She also had to delay a media conference yesterday after she was heckled by an anti-vaccination protester. Ms Ardern says the focus of her visits is to hear from providers on the ground and talk to people.
I did have conversations yesterday with a number of people who had made the decision to be vaccinated that day, and it had been a journey for them. And it is helpful for us to know what has made the difference so that we can continue to make sure we're sharing those messages that made a difference for them.
Jacinda Ardern says she changed her plans today because it wasn't practical for her to attend clinics if it was going to block people from being vaccinated. People who received their first COVID-19 vaccination on Super Saturday are being encouraged to now have their second dose. It's now 3 weeks since the nationwide event. Anyone who got their first dose on the day will receive email and text reminders to get a second shot. The Ministry of Health says the reminder will be supported by advertising around NPC rugby matches this weekend and on radio and social media. The mother of 4-year-old Chloe Smith, taken from a tent in a West Australian campground 18 days ago, has posted on social media that her family is whole again. Police broke down the door of a house in the town of Carnarvon early this morning to find Chloe inside. They say the preschooler was alive, well and smiling, and told officers her name. Police say they had a fairly significant lead late yesterday. A 36-year-old man not known to Chloe's family is in custody and being questioned. The house where she was found was just a 6-minute drive from her own home. The Finance Minister says New Zealand's low unemployment rate is a sign the government's response to the pandemic has been the right one. The official unemployment rate has fallen to 3.4% in the 3 months ended September, from 4% in the previous quarter. Grant Robertson says it shows the resilience of the New Zealand economy.
Obviously, coming off the back of a strong 2020 and into 2021, and even though we've had this Delta outbreak, I think the economy's holding up. We're seeing across the board more people in work, lower rates of underemployment as well. So virtually on every indicator, this is a positive outcome.
The underutilisation rate, which is a measure of the slack in the labour market, also fell to 9.2%, the lowest since mid-2007. The Reserve Bank is considering additional measures to cool unsustainable prices in the housing market. Governor Adrian Orr says the central bank is finalising debt-to-income ratios as another potential measure to address the issue. He says an increasing supply of new housing will also help to bring prices back to sustainable levels.
The tide has turned. There is significant new space now available, both in terms of land and in terms of what you can do on that land. So we are seeing record high consent levels, we're seeing new areas being opened up, and we are going to be going into, I would say, a generational change in urban density.
In the meantime, Adrian Orr says banks need to be more cautious about risky mortgage lending. A group of people accused of earning money from illegally housed migrant workers in Auckland has been served restraining orders. It comes after authorities investigated makeshift accommodation in a former bingo hall in Manurewa and an unconsented boarding house in Remuera. Katie Todd reports.
Auckland Council says there were dozens of migrant workers living at the two sites in indoor cabins with no hot water, proper heating or laundry facilities. 2 people were convicted and fined for breaching the Building Act and the Resource Management Act. A third person who denies the charges is going to trial. The Council's Compliance Response and Investigations Manager, Kerry Ferguson, hopes its decision to refer the cases to the police will serve as a deterrent to others.
It's 5 minutes past 6. The Black Caps play Minnows Scotland tonight at the T20 Cricket World Cup in Dubai, knowing they can't take their opponents lightly if they're to make the semi-finals. New Zealand have had a win and a loss so far, going down to Pakistan but comprehensively beating India. Bowling coach Shane Jurgensen says after such a big crowd in their match against India, things will be more low-key tonight, but they can't let their standards slip.
With India, there was quite a big crowd, so these next few games, there may be crowds, there may not be. So I think it's just us making sure we stick to our standards and adapting, and probably for us, little things like our fielding in the daytime as opposed to the night time. It's certainly different with Big Blue sometimes.
The match starts at 11 p.m. The Atlanta Braves have won Major League Baseball's World Series for the first time since 1995 after a 7-0 win over the Houston Astros, and Game 6 sealed the title 4-2. A spectacular climb up the Remarkables has given Invercargill rider Josh Burnett a stage win on his debut in the Tour of Southland. The 21-year-old Burnett won the 101-kilometre fourth stage from Mossburn by 16 seconds, beating overall leader Michael Vink of Christchurch, who extended his hold on the yellow jersey to 1 minute and 43 seconds. And Chelsea has beaten Swedish side Malmo 1-0 to move closer to qualification for the last 16 of Europe's Champions League. Manchester United came from behind twice to draw 2-2 with Atlanta in Italy and stay top of their group. That's the news.
Tonight on Night's Wellington Verb, festival guest Helen Vivian Fletcher talks about the problem with fairy tales, or their nouns for a start. Pacifica poet Carlo Mila talks about Mana Moana, Pacific Voices, a message for COP26 combining short films with Pacific poetry, and The Kakapo Keeper, Gay Buckingham's historic novel based on the life of Fiordland conservation pioneer Richard Henry, is the Hump Prize. So join me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
And now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Thursday. Strong to gale southeasterlies for the majority of the North Island, with heavy rain in the east, gradually easing tomorrow. For Northland to Waitomo, including Bay of Plenty and the central North Island high country, periods of rain easing to isolated showers this evening, becoming fine from the Waikato southwards tomorrow. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, rain with heavy falls. Taranaki to Kapiti Coast, isolated showers. Wellington and Wairarapa, mostly cloudy with a few showers. For Marlborough and Canterbury, mostly cloudy, becoming fine tomorrow afternoon. Nelson to Fiordland, fine. Otago and Southland, remaining areas of cloud clearing this evening and becoming fine. And for the Chatham Islands, cloudy periods. It's 8 minutes past 6.
Nā mihi marama, no mai hoki mai. This is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. As daily community COVID cases continue to crack 3 figures, more government isolation facilities could be converted to quarantine hotels for those unable to stay at home while sick. But thousands of overseas returnees already in MIQ could get an early pass out, as new rules halving the stay from 2 weeks to 7 days come into force next week. And when they do get released, they'll be free to travel the country to get home and complete the final days of isolation. There's 670 quarantine rooms in Auckland, 300 of them are vacant right now. But Joint Head of MIQ, Brigadier Rose King, explains they're ready if demand increases.
So that modelling is still to be fully determined, and so as I said, we're working closely with the Ministry of Health in regard to what that looks like. At the moment, we are comfortable with the numbers we have, but we constantly review that, and in fact we do that daily to work out what will we require and how do we ensure that both with Ministry of Health and how they're supporting people in the community and with us being able to support, that we are able to provide the support the community needs.
As of the 29th of October, MB said it was operating at near maximum capacity in terms of MIQ. So have you already identified particular facilities that would best be converted to quarantine should they be required?
Yes, we've done a lot of work across the board, both in regard to which is the most appropriate facility, working with the owners of facility, local iwi and the like. And we do have contingency plans that we will consider if required. So what hotel would be the next cab off the rank if you need it? I'm not going to share that because a lot of that is commercial and confidence as well, but what I am confident to say is that we have worked through those different contingency plans and we have options available if required.
So you've already negotiated with the owners of that facility? You're ready to go if you have to?
In some cases, yes.
So is there more than one facility you're looking at converting if you need to?
I have to look across the whole of New Zealand and how I support all of New Zealand, and so I have looked at contingency options throughout New Zealand, from our facilities in the South Island through to Auckland as well.
So changes are coming in MIQ, right? November the 14th, the duration of stay is going to be cut in half, and we're told that that's going to be an extra 1,500 rooms a month. But I suppose the key question for people is how many of those rooms will actually be available for returning Kiwis via the lottery? So what's the magic number?
What's the magic number? There's a couple of things I'd just like to point out in regard to that. For a start, yes, we are changing to a 7-day stay, but what that means for us on the operational side is actually longer than 7 days. 7 days is the time that a returnee will stay with us. We have an infill period, and you should be aware of the cohorting model that we use. So we have an infill period of 2 to 3 days, the 7 days individual stay, and then once they've left, we then have to clean and do all the logistical preparations for the new incoming cohort. So in fact, for us, it's more like a 11-day period in regard to that. One of the things we need to consider right now, and that links to your previous comment about COVID in the communities, is what is the projections that we need. And what this will allow us to do is look at what do we need to keep for the community cases, quarantine, and where that projections of that goes. And therefore, what also, if we have commensurate savings, where that gets aligned to. As you've previously said, we're running near maximum capacity. So one of the things that I have previously had is a contingency. We've used that contingency to meet the requirements of our community cases, but we really need to build that back up. because if there is an emergency, let's say, for example, a fire or an earthquake, we need to have the capacity to be able to deal with that too. So we will work closely and daily to work out what does that actually mean for people, but it will take us a bit of time to actually, I guess, reap the benefits of those changes.
Brigadier, are you trying to gently tell us and prepare us for the fact that basically capacity in MIQ will barely change as a result of this?
No, I don't think it's a fact that it will barely change. There's a number of things. As I said, we need to make sure that we're prepared.
You must have a ballpark figure of what potentially could be returned to the lottery. So can you just give us a guide?
Well, I think, as we've said, the number of arrivals that we've had internationally has decreased since the beginning of the outbreak in Auckland and since August. And as I said before, we have actually used our operational contingency. So this model to 7 days will provide us some ability to regain those numbers back, and we will be looking to offset that against both the reduction in border capacity we have, because we've increased our queue facilities for our community cases, and also to rebuild capacity for those coming from the borders. It will increase, but it won't be an exact doubling.
Okay, because basically, again, the MIQ website says your capacity was reduced from mid-August due to the outbreak of Delta, and that these changes, well, they're probably just going to allow you to reinstate that capacity. Is that correct?
Well, it's a balance of both, isn't it? Because, we have dedicated over 800 rooms to quarantine capacity, so we need to claw that back to give back to the border cases, and also, as I said, to reset the contingency that we had. There's been a lot going on in the last few months. If we just look back, we had QFT suspension from Australia, we've had Afghanistan returnees and providing quarantine for community cases. So we need to get ourselves back to a space where we can increase returnees coming across the border, but we also need to ensure that we've got capacity to be able to deal with whatever we're faced with.
So when people finish their 7 days in MIQ and they head off to their home isolation, how do they get there? So if I came into Auckland and I was in MIQ, but my home is in Christchurch, can I just get in a car and drive down the island?
Well, you will be able to travel to the location of your isolation as long as you comply with all of the relevant prevention protocols that we have. So, for example, scanning in, wearing a mask and the like.
But people will be able to travel to their homes regardless of where they are in the country, taking public transport as well?
Correct. That is the situation, yes. And all of this is based on public health advice.
Okay, so in terms of people who come into MIQ or came into MIQ before the changes, is their stay in isolation going to be cut short? Will they be able to exit early too?
Yeah, so it's certainly our intent that on the 14th of November, when we change this, to do our best to enable those who have been with us for longer than the 7 days to help with them to leave at that period. It is quite a challenge for us though. So normally we have approximately 300 people leave per day, and obviously we have the protocols and the procedures that we use for that. We've estimated that we're going to have approximately 2,600 people that would be entitled to leave on the 14th of November, and we are working extremely hard right now to make sure that we can do that in the best way possible for those individuals. But, it may take us a couple of days, and so we just ask those people to be patient with us as we work through that, because it's really important that we only transition those people when it's safe to be transitioned.
And that's Brigadier Rose King. The COVID-19 Minister, Chris Hipkins, has told us tonight the government's considering giving Aucklanders an allocated time slot to leave the region over the summer holidays. Chris Bishop is National's COVID spokesperson and joins me now. What do you think of that idea, Chris?
I think it's one of the stupidest ideas I've ever heard. It's like Kiwi holiday or something, and MIQ is bad enough with the lottery of human misery for Kiwis to come home to their own country. The idea that Aucklanders will be allocated by the government like a week away or something, it just, when I first saw it on Twitter, actually, the Checkpoint newsfeed, I actually had to reread it about 3 times. I couldn't believe it. It's just one of the stupidest ideas I've ever heard from a government that is just all at sea about what to do and doesn't know what it's doing next. It's just unbelievable.
So give us a better idea then for Auckland and how to manage the boundary and summer and Christmas holidays.
Well, our view is that you get to 85%. Obviously, as high as possible, but 85% drop the restrictions, allow people to have a bit of freedom for Christmas. Obviously, we would say right now, vaccinated Aucklanders should be able to leave the Auckland prison that they've erected around Auckland. People who are vaccinated should be able to do that. The reason they can't is because we don't have vaccine certificates ready to go yet, which is just unbelievable. And, they're meant to be here by the end of November. We hope that's the case, start of December. But get to 85%, which is a matter of a couple of weeks away, drop the restrictions, let Aucklanders plan their summer holidays. This idea that people would get, January 4 to January 11 for your state-sponsored week away out of Auckland to the beach in the Coromandel or down to Taupo or something is like a dystopian nightmare. It's just unbelievable, and the government's got to rule it out straight away. I can't even believe they're seriously considering it.
So to be clear, 85% double dosed in Auckland. We're hovering around 81.3, but as soon as we hit 85, you'd throw open the gates, get rid of the border.
Yeah, that's our policy to do that, and I think at that level we would have one of the highest vaccination rates in the developed world, certainly in Auckland and right around the country as well. And we've just got to start getting back to some form of normality where people can, plan their summer holidays and they don't have to think about the week that the state's going to grant it in its munificence to people, and people should be grateful for it. It's just unbelievable.
Appreciate your time this evening. That's Chris Bishop, who's the National Party's COVID spokesperson. The rugby world has been rocked by news former All Black Carl Heyman has early onset dementia at age 41. All Blacks assistant coach John Plumtree says New Zealand and World Rugby are doing all they can to minimise the risk of head injuries. Heyman, who was an All Black prop, told the Bounce Sports newsletter he's been struggling with head-related issues since retiring 6 years ago. Felicity Reid reports.
Mialamu to Nonu, puts the foot down Nonu, now he's looking to fire it back on the inside to Jack, and now here's Carl Heyman!
Oh, what a try.
First test try for Carl Heyman.
Carl Heyman became the 1,000th All Black when he made his test debut against Samoa in 2001 and played the last of his 45 tests in the shock loss to France in the quarter-final at the 2007 World Cup. Heyman played for the Highlanders and Otago before heading offshore for stints with Newcastle in the UK and Toulon in France. He hung up his boots in 2015. All Blacks assistant coach John Plumtree says he's saddened to learn of Heyman's diagnosis.
Carl done a lot for New Zealand rugby, and it's just a real sad situation if he's struggling with dementia at such an early age. So, we've got a lot of empathy for that. I know that he's been a pretty popular person in this environment. So, it's not nice to hear about that.
Plumtree, though, is adamant the game is changing and that the lawmakers are doing all they can to minimise the risk of concussion.
It has changed a lot. There's a greater awareness around it from the top level right down through to us as coaches, trying to minimise that accidents around the head. We know the game's under pressure to make sure that we do that. We've got a responsibility as coaches to make sure that parents want their kids to play.
New Zealand Rugby Chief Executive Mark Robinson, who played alongside Heyman, says he's saddened to learn of Heyman's situation but maintains player safety and welfare is NZR's number one priority. Otago University Associate Professor Melanie Bussey is part of the world's largest study into head impacts in rugby. Researchers are wading through data from more than 40,000 incidents of head knocks collected from 622 athletes, ranging from children to the pros. They hope to release the results of what Bussey is calling a benchmark study by early next year.
A lot of the research and a lot of the other sporting commissions have kind of focused more on the professional side. Professionals have a long playing career before they get to professional. And it's really important to look at the community cases and what's happening at the younger children and the other ages. So I think that's where the scope of this study is different. And the objective has always been that we give them information that hopefully feeds into their policies and guidelines going forward.
Heyman revealed his diagnosis to reporter Dylan Cleaver, who has been investigating rugby and head injuries. Cleaver says scientists now believe it's not necessarily concussion, but the accumulation of hits on rugby players like Heyman.
He played more than 400 professional games of rugby across, I think it was a 17-year career. So there is an estimate, obviously we don't know exactly, but he could have taken up to 150,000 sub-concussive hits if you put all his games and his trainings right through to his school days. So it's a huge number.
Heyman has joined the lawsuit being prepared on behalf of 150 former professional rugby players, claiming rugby's governing bodies failed to protect players from the risks caused by head knocks. Rugby is not the only sport facing claims. 10 former rugby league players are also taking a legal claim against Rugby Football League for negligence.
An astonishing outcome. The 4-year-old girl who disappeared almost 3 weeks ago from a remote Australian campsite has been found alive. Police broke into a locked house in the early hours of the morning and rescued the toddler. World Watch's Paulina Lau has the details.
A parent's worst nightmare turned a miraculous outcome. After 18 days of searching and investigating, police broke into a locked house in the coastal town of Carnarvon and found 4-year-old Cleo Smith.
One of the officers picked her up into his arms and asked her, "What's your name?" She said, "My name is Cleo." Cleo was reunited with her parents a short time later. This is the outcome we all hoped and prayed for. We'll have more to say on the rescue of Cleo as the day unfolds. But for now, welcome home, Cleo.
Cleo had been on holiday with her family at a remote campsite, sleeping in a tent next to her sister's cot. When her mother, Ellie, went to check on her in the morning, the tent door was open and Cleo had disappeared. The case sparked an extensive and thorough land, air and sea search. Western Australia Police Commissioner Chris Dawson thanked the parents and the community.
This is one of the most remarkable days in policing in Western Australia. I mean, I've been in policing for 45 years and I can say this is why police come to work every day. We'll leave no stone unturned and we never gave up hope. Look, of course we were very concerned, but we followed every particular lead that we had. It was methodical, it was dedicated, it was skilled and it was dogged.
A 36-year-old man with no connection to the family is now in custody and being questioned by detectives.
We're still questioning a fellow, so it's probably difficult for me to really expand on it too much more. But there was some information which we followed up on. We have been following a lot of the forensic leads and it led us to a particular house. I've seen the vision, I can't release it yet, of the police going into the house. I will confirm she was found in the house was locked, we had to break down the door to get in.
The community is understandably relieved, and here's the Commissioner on how Cleo is doing.
She's, look, as well as we could expect in the circumstances. I've seen the vision of her, she's alive, well, smiling. Ellie and Jake are clearly emotional, but importantly, they never gave up hope. This is a wonderful result today, but it'll still be a tough journey.
After fears she had been taken, police had offered a reward of $1 million for any information about Cleo. There were reports bounty hunters had travelled to the region to join the search once the cash reward was offered. The locals are rejoicing. Here's resident Kim Nguyen from the Gascoigne Bakery in Carnarvon.
I think the whole community will be so happy with this, and I'm in tears now, seriously. I'm so happy for her and her family, because I know her mum pretty well as well. So the community, every single person in town, they try to help, and we are here every day, just pray for her to be safe. That's what we want.
The Shire of Carnarvon, Eddie Smith, is speechless.
I think the whole community should have a day off. Everybody's been so worried and concerned, and it's happened. I'm a little bit speechless at the moment. I'm just trying to catch up, get my head around the fact that she has been found.
After a horrendous 2.5 weeks and little sleep, Cleo's mother posted on Instagram saying, "Our family is whole again."
Western Australia Police say the man in custody is a local from Carnarvon and he's assisting police with their inquiries. They've released a photo of Cleo in hospital, eating an ice block and waving. Stay in the game, get your shot. That's the message Pacifica sports stars took to the launch of a vaccination event in Auckland today. Tale Anderson has more.
Former Silver Fern Linda Vangana was a force on the netball court. Now she wants to score some wins with getting people vaccinated.
Do this for your young people, do this for everyone that's vulnerable, and play your part. Get vaccinated.
Vangana lives in a house with an elderly father, an elderly auntie, 2 siblings, 3 nieces and 2 nephews.
That's a Pacifica household. That's a Pacifica village. So it makes sense for me today to stand and take a stand with my fellow athletes here, because we have seen what a pandemic can do.
For the past month, she's been connecting with the netball community, making calls and sending emails, encouraging members to make the most of the drive-through event this week.
My emails have been mental with trying to share the message across all the platforms for netballers. And on top of that, it'll be just turning up and saying good job to everybody who's actually doing the hard work.
Former Samoan-born New Zealand professional boxer Whamuina Toaletai Mawhawhau David Toa is doing his bit for the community. He says apart from being a staunch Māngele boy, he wants to ensure Pacific communities, particularly those who can't get vaccinated, are being looked after.
My health is compromised. That's why I'm here to support what Legend Lemalu and the team are doing to making sure that young people, our youth, and those who are not vaccinated can get not only their first jab, but their double jab.
The Minister for Pacific Peoples, Aupito William Seal, believes the backing of Pasifika sports stars will help achieve the 90% goal for Auckland. He says the numbers need to be pushed hard on the 20 to 24 age group, who are still at 78% of first dose, while the 25 to 34 age group are at 79%.
This is the last 15 minutes of the game, and we've got to really put all our effort into it to be able to reach that 90% of fully vaccinated people here in Auckland.
And league-turned-union man Roger Tuivasa-Sheck says it's a no-brainer to get behind a community which has continued to support him throughout his footy career.
That's what sports is all about, is just bringing families and friends together. And, I think a lot of people all across the world and New Zealand just want to do that. They want to get back to that everyday socialising, playing sports, having a laugh with their mates.
Anyone needing their first or second dose can drive through this Friday or Saturday. There will also be an opportunity for people to walk in and to inquire about the vaccination itself with health practitioners, nurses and other staff on site.
A lot of you getting in touch about the scheme that, the government's working on to get Aucklanders out and about over the summer, over the border, and the potential that you might have to book a spot to leave the city. This one from Tony. These guys are absolute morons. The queues are bad enough in summertime, leaving Auckland, let alone checking everyone's passes. What a joke. And Lynn from Tauranga says he's a dreamer if he thinks that'll work, and what a bloody nightmare it's become to live in New Zealand. Thank you for your feedback. Ko te kaupapa tuatahi a pōpō. Tomorrow, first up at 5 a.m, speaks to All Blacks pitch invader Daniel Jarvis. Remember, he's the one that joined the All Blacks on the field for the national anthem in Wales at the weekend. One not to miss.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Protesters have disrupted the Prime Minister's tour of vaccination centres for a second day. Work is being done to try and plan for thousands of fully vaccinated Aucklanders potentially being able to leave the city for the summer holidays. Nearly 700 people recovering from COVID-19 are self-isolating at home in Auckland, with the total number of active cases in the region just over 1,900. Recommendations on COVID-19 booster shots will go to Cabinet within the next few weeks. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather is at 7.
If you think RNZ has breached formal standards, either on air or in our online content, you have the right to make a formal complaint. This must be made in writing